get our work done.
Rented a car.
Yeah. Exactly.
If you
And it allows us to do both things really well, which
$18.
feels good.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started and give Katie some time. We are fortunate Katie has already preached today, now she's going to teach today. So. What else we
Y'all
got?
gonna be sick of me by the end of it all.
Never. I don't think so. On page two,
I know, right?
on page 2, you'll see Kelly Aikens preparing for worship. Oh, let me tell you one thing before we start, because some of you may have to leave a little earlier. Deborah went into the hospital this week, was there Monday through Thursday, had a TIA, and unfortunately Jeff went to see her, and so did Vicki, and so did I. They did something that only has happened twice in Dallas. She has a pacemaker, and she had an MRI of her head. So they had to call the pacemaker company. There was a guy on the phone the whole time walking them through everything, turning the pacemaker off, getting it restarted. 4 of the doctors there, they didn't want to do it. And so it didn't happen until she had a CT scan the first day, MRI the next day, but it took all day to get approval. It's only been done one time at Parkland before to do this with a person with a pacemaker. And she told them all, she says, look, God's got this, don't worry, let's do it. And she told all those people this on the thing, and she got through it, so it was good. But it was a challenge. So now she's got to meet this week with a neurosurgeon to find out what caused the occlusion in her neck, the back of her neck, that caused that, because she had just all the heart attack symptoms. I mean, her left arm sore. She drove herself to the hospital, and fortunately she was able to stop at Walnut Hill and massage her arm a little bit so she could keep going. She said it was killer. At any rate, she made it. She apparently worked there. The people that parked the cars, New Valley Parking, saw her. Hi, Miss Deborah. Got her car and took it off for her and all that. And she made it in, but it was a mess.
And what's it called? The ITI?
TI.
TI trends.
Yeah, something. What she said. Yeah,
TI.
okay. All right, Kelly Aikens is on page 2. You'll want to read that. This is a great Sunday with all the pictures of all the graduates in there. A bunch of folks on chancel today, but look at page 8 and 9 for all these pictures. Really great group of folks. Picnic today. Hope the rain comes and goes. We'll see about that. But that's at 5 o'clock today on Flagpole Hill. Of course, condolences. We talked last Sunday about Mary Lynn Bright. You'll see that on top of page 11. A college class this summer. You'll see that on page 11. George Mason returns to the pulpit next week. And Lunch and Learn on May 20th. On page 12, the history wall has been updated. You'll see that on, like I said, top of page 12. Can you help in VBS? That's on page 12. And meals packed on MLK Day are headed to the Philippines. I hope those is okay. They packed them on January, so I hope they don't spoil. No chicken salad, I hope.
That's great.
Okay, good. All right. 75th anniversary type stuff you see on page 13. And Carolyn still needs volunteers. If you want to be a docent on the 13th, sign up. There's a lot of places. And this week in the history, you'll see Doug Haney on May 19th, 2004, and Jay Hogwood begins residency in May of 2002. And that's very interesting. New song concert on June 3rd, and neurodiversity speaker coming. Okay, neurodiversity. Somebody help me with this. Anybody know about this?
That's like OCD, ADD.
Okay.
Autism,
TLA.
those kind of. So it's for
It's
teachers,
just
teachers and
people that-
parents that might want to come and learn about
Okay.
how to make sure all of our kids are getting what they need.
Okay.
So, from their teachers.
All right. My mom told me I had half-ass burgers. Okay, so let's see here. Page 75, we have some photos on page. 70th anniversary on page 15. Really good pictures of some of the early pastors, Bruce and Ralph and Peter Drumright, of course George and Timothy.
George
And
looks
then-
like a teenager.
Ann Hill's photos today. And boy, can you tell that was an old-timey photograph. Look at her shadow against the wall on that thing. That's classic. At any rate, I'm going to pass the prayer book around. We have a new prayer book from Diana. It has a new look, but we're going to make it work. And if you'll do it at 10:40,
Yeah.
or whenever you're finished.
love it. On page 14, there's this photo here that you may have seen. This was a really neat opportunity we had on, was this Tuesday? It feels like it's been a month, but it's only a week's time. I think May 12th was a Tuesday. Yes, we had a Sacred Spaces event here at the church, and we hosted about 70 people from all different faith backgrounds. And we showed them the sacred spaces in our building, and it was amazing. George did like a history presentation at the beginning, kind of helping to lay out like how we get from Jesus' resurrection all the way, you know how George does. Him and history are just like, it's so great. But kind of explaining to people why when you say Christian, it can mean so many different things. And when you say Baptist, it can also mean so many different things. And so,
What were some of the sacred spaces he took?
yeah, so we took them, they were on a rotation, and we had ministers in every space. So I was in the columbarium, kind of explaining why that's a sacred space for our church. Heather and Jordan were in the chapel, kind of introducing them to some of the rituals and liturgies that we have in church. So they talked about the Lord's Supper, baptism, you know, kind of some of those things that happen either every month or once in a person's life. Darren was down in the youth center, kind of showing them the space that we have for raising up, you know, kids in the faith as they're learning independence there. Kelly had them in the preschool to introduce our Godly Play curriculum, which is phenomenal. My son has had that this year.
What was that?
Godly Play. This is it's a new curriculum to us. It's very, it's been around for a long time, many decades. It's kind of based on the Montessori program, but it's a way of teaching the stories of the Bible to preschool age children. And actually they're moving it up to kindergarten next year too, in a way that is very play-based for them to understand. And so James, my youngest, has had it this year. And it's been so neat to see how he has connected with these, like, the stories of the Bible in ways that are really well suited for him. Like, he's retaining information about Noah's Ark, Jonah and the whale, the temple, about Jesus' birth, you know, all of this, the parables, in ways that I hadn't seen with my other two kids. And I think just because this curriculum's really good. And so Kelly showed that to the people as well. What were some of the other sacred spaces? Jeff had them up in Coral Hall as well. And then we all met in the sanctuary. We sang a version of Blessed Be the Tie, but our hearts in sacred love, since we had people from all types of denominations there and all religious faiths as well. So it was really great. And a lot of people walked out saying, this is not what I thought of when I thought of a Baptist church. You don't fit the stereotype. And we're like, well, good. We're glad we could show you a different way of doing that, and a way that we think is still very authentic to the Baptist tradition. And so, yeah, it was just really cool. I think it was one of those moments where we were at our best, you know? We have those moments where you're just like, yeah, this is like, gets at the heart of who we are. So it was very much lay-led by a lot of people here at the church, so it was cool to see.
Nice.
It was awesome. And yeah, have y'all noticed the banners on Abrams and Mockingbird? Okay, when you leave, look in the medians at the banners, and they all are celebrating our 75th anniversary. So we got those set up right outside on Abrams, and then Mockingbird heading towards Central for the first little bit, maybe on your way towards Birdie's, you know, east side down there. But it's all, you know, there's a purple one, a green one, and it talks about, you know, Mark did a beautiful job working on all of that. Mark McKenzie did, so.
Cool.
All right, well, I'm here for the next 2 weeks. I'm excited to be with you all. We're doing the 10 Commandments today, which thank goodness, because it's May and life is chaotic and crazy, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to prepare. And then I saw the 10 Commandments, and I was like, we can do this, y'all. Between me and y'all, this lesson will happen today. But the 10 Commandments, I wanted us to start out with, what are they? I'm going to test us.
Thou shalt have no
Thou
other
shalt.
God before me.
No other God before me. Okay.
You may want to, yeah, okay.
No other God. Oh, I should probably make that little G. Hold on. Before me. What else?
False testimony.
False testimony. It's one of the harder ones to remember.
Don't take the Lord's name in vain.
Okay.
Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy.
The Sabbath. God's name, right?
Honor your father and mother.
Yep. Oh, gosh.
And the one we all used to giggle over, don't covet your neighbor's ass.
Yeah. We should have done this in the KJV today. Well, the NRSV is not nearly as much fun. Okay, hold on. Y'all are going so fast. No other gods before me, false testimony, Sabbath, God's name. There's another one somebody said.
On your father and mother.
Father and mother, yes.
I think they dropped one of them, the 9 Commandments in Texas.
Yes. Which one do you think they dropped?
General Sable. You can check the Attorney General.
Okay. Oh, like they literally did. I thought you were making a joke. When they posted them up in the schools.
Well, not.
Covet. Okay.
Say.
It's a joke.
It is one? Okay.
There was a letter to the editor yesterday that said,
No
yeah,
way.
I want them in there, and when you get to the part
Oh.
about not cheating or
Oh,
whatever,
yeah.
put Paxton and Trump up there.
Don't covet. So we've got no other gods before me, no false testimony, honor the Sabbath day, keep it holy, don't take the Lord's name in vain, honor your father and mother, don't covet,
Don't steal.
Don't kill.
kill, that's a big one, don't kill,
Don't steal.
Don't steal.
kill, don't steal. What are we up to?
Don't bear false
Is
witness.
that?
Oh, you already got it.
We got that one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 2 more.
Isn't don't covet thy neighbor's wife different from thy neighbor's ass?
So there's
I was not going for a laugh line. when I
no,
said
you're true. It's true. Good
Well, you
one.
can't commit adultery.
Okay.
That's what.
maybe
That's one of the big
Yeah.
ones. Adultery.
Well, actually, that is a separate one.
Yeah, it is separate from covet.
It is
That is
separate.
I think that gets us all.
There's 9 Commandments in Texas.
So don't kill. Don't covet. There's the house.
There's also.
But then don't covet. Or is there another one?
No, it's don't covet, meaning like
Your
any
neighbor's
of
house.
their stuff.
Right.
But then don't commit.
Ah, okay. I see what we're doing. So, yes,
Or their donkey.
yes.
Or their donkey.
We're getting a little bit. Okay, there is one other one technically, but we're also showing part of the issue here too in our
Don't
conversation.
take the Lord's name in vain.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
No, you should got that.
That's
Okay,
there.
yeah, that's there.
Is the odd, no?
There's-
Where's the odd?
That is, yeah, that's a separate one. That is,
Do
you
we
shall
have
not
to
make
make
yourself an idol.
consent?
How did they do this in Austin if we can't even
I
do it?
know.
So there's the idol one. Do we have the idol one?
We haven't put that up there yet. That's the 10th.
I think it's the
It's not
idol.
the 10th in the Bible, but it's the 10th.
Correct. We're out of order.
Yeah,
We're
we're
just
out.
doing it
Yeah,
as
we are out.
they were read to me, or they were shouted to me, lovingly, shared with me. Idol. Okay. So, but we also did kind of get to a little bit of the struggle that people have had over the years, which is our scriptures. We don't actually have the stones that Moses was given with those on them, and our scriptures do not list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're not delineated. We know that there are 10 words, is how it's translated from the Hebrew. 10 words, and so over time there has been a little bit of. Does this one of you shall not make for yourself a false idol, does that fit in with the first one? And then we covet, there's 2 different separations between covet. We're trying to figure out what are the 10, right? But I think this kind of encompasses generally how we feel about them.
Well,
More or less
the
today.
rabbi said 2 weeks ago in their discussion that yours won't be the same as mine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a little bit but I think they're mostly covered in there. We did a good job. Y'all did a good job, I think. False testimony being number 2. I thought that's the one we were going to be working on, having a hard time with. So well done. Okay, all that to say, we're in the 10 Commandments today. The 10 Commandments comes in a part of Exodus. They have left. Let's kind of get ourselves in some of the history here. The Jewish people had been enslaved in Egypt for generations, right? And God calls Moses to go and free the Israelites, to lead them over the Red Sea, or the Reed Sea is probably a better translation. And then they're wandering in the wilderness, and they come towards Sinai. I'm not sure, I didn't look it up on the map, so I can't actually show you. But Sinai really isn't anywhere near. Where we think Sinai is would make no sense for them to go there, right? And so, like where they were in Egypt to where they're going in the Promised Land, Sinai is nowhere on that pathway for them to get there.
Didn't they do a lot
Sinai,
of wandering?
they did a good bit of wandering, but they've tried to figure out, like, this doesn't quite make sense. Like, but you know, it's been a long time, so we might be missing some things. Sinai, that's also known as Horeb, depending on what part of scriptures you're looking at. But, so what they believe may have happened over time is that maybe that there were some different traditions that have been worked in together into this story of the wilderness of the Jewish people.
What? It's not literally true.
It might not be. There may be a little bit of blending of these oral history stories. So, yeah, the facts may not all line up, but I think the truth of what we will see today still holds true, which is really all I care about, right? Like that, you know, I think the central purpose and point of this will still hold true. It's been a minute, but especially when we're looking at the first 5 books of the Old Testament, I think it's important to remember that several different sources were all put together to compile. I think I did a long time ago a lesson on Noah's Ark, where I kind of helped to show that there were actually 2 different traditions that they had interwoven together, which is why sometimes in the Ark he's asking for 2 of each animal, but sometimes there's 7, right? And you're like, well, which one is it, right? And then it seems like they've left, or that they get out of the boat, but then they're back in the boat, right? Or like they send out one bird, but then they send out another bird, and you're like, this feels overly complicated. And it's because it's actually 2 stories that they unwove and then weaved back together. And so if you're sometimes reading the Old Testament and you feel like this is confusing, you're right, it is, that's not you. It's multiple traditions. So let's review them for a minute here, because I think that's important for us to know as we come also into the Sinai chapters of Exodus here. So, and we won't go into all the details here. I love using the board, sorry y'all, I know it makes it confusing for the camera. But there are the J source, okay? There's an P source, and there's an E source. There's also a D source, but that's Deuteronomy, so we're not going to use that for this one, okay? But in the J source, we have, and I'm forgetting, I didn't write down all their names, and I have forgotten them, so, but I promise you they're there. But this is the source that comes from the southern kingdom, okay? So the southern kingdom of Judah, so J is somehow attached to Judah, but I don't remember the exact name. But this is the southern kingdom of Judah, because once they're split is when we start to, actually it's once they've been taken away by the Assyrians and Babylonians that they start writing all this stuff down to begin with, because they've been taken away, like the kingdoms have crumbled, and they're trying to remember their stories, right? Because they've once again been removed. And so they're writing their stories down finally. So this is such a long time after the events of what happened here. So these are the tradition that come out of the southern kingdom, okay? And so here is where the mountain is called Sinai, okay? And then we have the priestly kingdom, or the priestly source. This also comes out of the southern kingdom, but it has a lot more to do with the rites and rituals and worship. So whenever you're in the first 4 books of the Old Testament and they start talking about how the temple should be, or the ark should be built, right? Or this is the way that this prayer should be said, or this is how you do this worship service, more than likely that's coming from the priestly source here, okay? So it's also, I think it's called Sinai here too, because it's from the southern kingdom. So the mountain here will be called Sinai. And then the E source is, I do remember this one, the Elohist. God is called Elohim in this, so Yahweh would be the way that they refer to God in these 2. These are Yahweh. And this one is the Elohist, so Elohim. This is the northern kingdom of Israel. Okay, so you're going to get God referred to as Elohim, and you're going to get the mountain referred to as Horeb. Have you ever seen that in the Old Testament? The mountain of Horeb? Same thing as the mountain of Sinai. Just a different group of people writing about it with a different, and they, you know. So that explains that. But from a different region, they call it something different. It's like here in Dallas, some people call it 75, some people call it Central, right? It's the same highway. right? I grew up in Austin, depending on where you were in the city, the same street could be called 3 different things. So, Capital Texas Highway 360, it's all the same, right? Depending on where you are. So same thing, same mountain, different names. Okay, so we come to this source, and the thing that they all agree with is that God revealed God's self to the people of Israel on the mountain. But that's the only thing that they all agree on. And so, what you will notice here, if you kind of back it up and move to chapter 19, before we get to the 10 Commandments, it appears that Moses is running up and down this mountain like 15 times. Okay? And no one's allowed to go up there, but then Aaron is allowed to go up there, and then the priests are allowed to go up halfway, right? And then the people need to stay where they are, but then the people need to come to the base of the mountain, and then they need to go back, and they need to prepare themselves ritualistically for their encounter with God, right? And so you read chapter 19, and if it looks like Moses is running up and down this mountain and has different rules, that's because you're having the connection of these 3 sources' testimony for what happened on that mountain. Okay? So, again, if you're reading the Old Testament and it sounds confusing, it is, and that's okay. It's not you. You're hearing multiple traditions being woven in together. And what's the big T truth that they all believe in? God revealed God's self to the people of Israel. That's the truth there. God wanted to know the people of Israel and revealed God's self to them. There's just a little bit of a different remembrance of what that looked like here. Okay? Also, only one of them contains the 10 Commandments. 2 of them do not. Okay? E, the Elohist, is the only source that has any reference to the 10 Commandments here. Okay? Now, the D source, I said there was a D source as well, which is in Deuteronomy. That's why we also have this as one of our scripture passages for today. Whoops. Okay, so the D source also has the 10 Commandments. Okay? But the E source, this is what we're reading today when we look at the 10 Commandments. Okay? The P source, what Moses gets from the mountain, are all of the instructions on how to do worship and how to build the house for God. Okay? So when you get to that part, which comes in excruciating detail after the 10 Commandments, that's the P source. The P source is going to often feel like excruciating detail. But it was important for the priests. They needed to know, right? They are in exile. And they need to remember, we've got to pass down what are the rituals, how do we do this, how do we worship God? That's the P source. So you'll see that throughout there as well. Okay, is that helpful?
Yes.
Any questions about that? Any curiosities, Laura?
I do have a curiosity.
Yeah.
Is Leviticus from the P source?
Yeah, they think a lot of Leviticus as a P source. Yeah. Doesn't that make so much sense?
Yes.
And so you read that and you're like, this is a bore, but I'm not a priest. So like, it kind of should be a bore for you. But like, how important, right? If they're in exile and they're hoping one day to get back to Jerusalem and to be able to reestablish themselves as a people, we need Leviticus.
Oh my goodness.
Sitting here in 2026, it's a drag. But you try to read the Bible in a year and you get to Leviticus and you start to reconsider. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Quit.
Yeah, absolutely. David.
When Jesus brought down the 10 Commandments to this 2,
Yeah.
was he doing the east side or was he doing all 3?
Sorry, say that at the very beginning, when Jesus?
He was asked about the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
And he just gave 2.
Yes, love God and love, yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah.
What was he referring to E or was there?
So he would have had the Torah already. So at that point, he's carrying around generally the same thing that we would have in the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So by that point, they've already compiled this all together. So he's got more or less, I'm sure there's differences. But what they would have had in the time of Christ was already the scrolls as we see them more or less here.
Were the scrolls before the 10 Commandments as well, before they got taken into captivity to begin with?
No, so I think generally all of these are being written while they're in exile. So right now where we are is they're traveling in the wilderness. They're out of Egypt, right? Moses is taking them into the wilderness and they're going to be there for 40 years, right? And then they're gonna go into the promised land, right? And they're gonna establish the kingdom of Israel. And then that kingdom's gonna split, remember, into the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. This takes place in Kings and Chronicles and Samuel and all that kind of stuff. The Syrians are gonna come get the northern kingdom. Babylon is gonna come get the southern kingdom. And they're gonna exile them out of the promised land.
how long
And
did
this
that
is when we start writing these things right here. It's the first 5 books of the Bible will start being written during that time.
In the second exile, how long were they exiled?
That part I don't remember.
Okay.
Different, and there were some that were still left behind, right? They didn't take everybody into Babylon and Assyria. But eventually they'll start allowing them to come back. But I think it was a long time, like generations, I believe.
70 years on some of them, I think.
Right? I think it was, kind of,
Yeah.
it was a long time. So all the more reason for them to start taking what was oral and to start writing it down.
So
Yeah.
before
Mhm.
it was written down, before they were taken away, maybe they didn't need it to be written down because they were right there.
It was right
and
there.
all together,
Yeah.
passing it down orally.
Exactly. I mean, I'm sure they had things that were written down, different ways and practices and different, but yeah, so much of it was oral, so few people could read, like
That
it
was the
was.
other thing. Did it
Yeah,
coincide with literacy
that's a great question.
later?
That's a
They were
great,
able to write it down?
that's a great question. I'm not as sure. I'm sure there was maybe some of that, yeah, or at least a desire to teach the Hebrew language while they're in exile, maybe, yeah. To make sure that the generations that continue, I could imagine that being a thing that they might be curious in doing.
What kind of said,
No, no.
70 years?
70 years, yeah. So it's, a couple generations in here that they have. So yeah, again, if it sounds confusing or inefficient, right? You're like, why wouldn't God just give Moses all the information and then send, why is he sending them up and down? It's different traditions that remember the story differently. But the main truth that remains is God is revealing God's self to the people of Israel and letting them know, I am your God. I'm the one that liberated you out of the land of Egypt. I am your God. You are my people. And making that connection and covenant with one another. The 10 Commandments is one of the covenants that we get, one of the major covenants that we have here. And what follows, it's actually in chapter 19, in verse 5. Now therefore, if you obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession out of all the peoples. Indeed, the whole earth is mine, but you shall be for me a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. Okay, and then what follows are the 10 Commandments here.
Let us
Katie,
know.
at what point did Moses die? I mean, I know he wasn't allowed to go to the promised land, but then you said they were there, then they were not. And so
Yeah.
Was it,
So the way that it tells us, one, it's interesting because historically, what the Bible tells us is that Moses wrote Deuteronomy, which means he also wrote his death. Because that is occurs in Deuteronomy. But the way that the story is written is that, he dies on the eve of when they walk into the promised land kind of thing. Like God had said, because of, what did he do wrong?
He struck the rock.
He struck the rock, that's right. He struck the rock, and then he wasn't gonna be allowed to go in. And so
they've been there 40 years,
And
whatever.
Joshua will take
Wandered, then he got.
He dies at the end of the
then
40
they
years.
went in. But then, how long were they in before they went out again?
I mean, they're in for a long time, right? Because they go in and they are gonna be, they're gonna be going into the promised land, they have all the wars, they've gotta displace all the people, and then they've gotta start building up. I mean, it was that one, Brian's gonna look it up for me.
I am.
A long time. Longer than they were in exile, I would imagine. Because they've gotta build a whole kingdom. They walk in as kind of still like tribes, and then they are removed as kingdoms, so, long time.
Because you go through the judges. And
The
then
judges,
kings
yes,
and then-
yep, all the different kings and all of that, so yeah. It was hard.
About 620 years.
Yeah, 600 is a significant amount of time, yeah.
So 400 in Egypt.
Longer than America's been here,
Yeah, really.
right? So like, we can think about that, they were in there for a very long time, yeah, before they were taken over. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions about that before we dig in?
Good stuff.
Right? I just find it helpful, I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand. With that appreciation, we can look at the 10 Commandments. So this, again, is coming from The tradition from the Elohist source, which is in the northern kingdom, these 10 commandments here. Okay. It's, it's always interesting, they look at these kind of similar communities at the time in this area and region of the world. And the Assyrians and the Hittites, which would have been kind of in the general area, also had kind of covenants between leaders and their subjects, right? Or owners and enslaved persons, like kind of these agreements. You must do this or else kind of thing. And in some ways, this is kind of modeled after some of those treaties or things that would have happened in the region. But it also kind of shows, so we see sometimes this God that feels very strong, kind of demanding at times, but maybe that's because it was modeled after some of these agreements where it was definitely a relationship divide there. But we have here, let's look at all these different, okay, we've already talked about that. Here we go. All right. Our Jewish brothers and sisters, when they look at the 10 Commandments, will divide it into groups of 5. 2 groups of 5. So you have the first 5 commandments, which are positive commandments, and 5 negative commandments. Thou shalt not, that are more coveting and lying and bearing false witness and all of that. As Christians, we generally talk about these as obligations to God and obligations to people. And I think that's what we see from Jesus is really who we're pulling that from, because then when they ask him what's the most important commandment, he narrows it down to 2, right? And it's God and our neighbors, one another. And so we kind of see that in these 10 commandments. That's where that tradition comes from for us as Christian people. And so we have the first one, which is, you shall have no other gods before me. All right? Before me, right? Okay, that's what strikes me about this too. It's not the denial that other deities exist at this point, right? But it's saying, I'm going to be you are, right what it says in chapter 19, right? If you obey my voice, you will be my treasured possession, and I will make you a priestly kingdom, and a holy nation. There may be other ones, but I'm yours and you're mine. We only see each other, right? So again, it's not the denial of, because at the time that this would have been written down, all of this, there was this understanding that there are other gods, right? But Yahweh is different, and we worship Yahweh, right? It was more about proving how Yahweh was different from the other gods than it was denying the other gods' existence in the first place. Okay? It's changed even in the Jewish understanding and teaching, but at least in how it was explained in the time it was written down. It was not a denial of other gods.
Is before a good translation of the word, whatever the word was, or?
I think so. Before me, that's a great question. Another way is besides me. There is a little footnote in my Bible, at least. It says another way to translate that is, you shall have no other gods besides me. Yeah, I will be your only. Because right, before is interesting because it does make.
You can have all those other gods, but I'm first.
I'm first, right? But I think maybe besides, it maybe gets more to the point of that's trying to be made here. Yeah, besides, you can't have any other gods besides me. Yeah, but it would have been revolutionary for the time. They would have been the odd group out here to only have one God that they were worshiping. So it would have made them very different from the other surrounding communities and nations. So, in verse 4, you shall not make for yourself any idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven or above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. All right. Thoughts on that one? What do you see? What catches your mind here?
Aaron forgot about that one.
Yeah.
The golden calves and all.
Yeah. They forget about it immediately, right? This is going to be the first big sin of Israel. And I've taught this lesson in here too, which also ends up being the sin that leads to their destruction with Assyria and Babylon, because it'll happen again in the northern kingdom. But yes, they'll go from this to immediately making the golden calves. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Although I will say, so something that's interesting historically looking at this, it wasn't necessarily, I think when we interpret this now, we tend to think that the areas of the time were worshiping the idols, right, in and of themselves, or that they could make an image of God. What we've come to find through, history and learning more about these surrounding communities is that they weren't worshiping the idols themselves, but that the idols could somehow be the resting space for the god. That there was a way that they could contain their deities in this kind
An
of way.
altar type thing,
Hmm?
an altar.
I kind of, yeah. So there was, let me see if I can say, so images played an essential part in the worship of pagan deities, right? So this was in some way God's way of saying, like, we're not going to worship in the same way that these other worship. But it says worshipers in the ancient world did not think that the image was actually a god or goddess, although that's how the Bible caricatures them, especially in Isaiah. But rather, as was usual in ancient Near East, the statue was where the god manifested their presence. Right? So again, it's this idea and this understanding. And actually that's what they think happened with the golden calves. It's not that they started worshiping these golden calves, but that they were trying to create a place that would manifest the presence of Yahweh. And always like, I just told you we're not going to do that. Like, that's not how we're going to work. That's not how this is going to happen. Yeah. And so it was almost like they were like, hey, well, we see everybody else manifesting the presence of their gods, so we're going to try to do the same, And Yahweh's like, no, we've already talked about this. That's not how this is going to work. So again, it would have ostracized, made them very different from the surrounding religions of the day. Okay, the third commandment, how are we doing here? Yeah, we'll kind of breeze through these pretty quick here. The third commandment is, you shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God. Don't take the Lord's name in vain.
That's one we don't have.
God's name in vain. I just didn't put much in it.
Yeah. No, we got it.
Okay.
Fourth one down.
Yeah, don't take God's name in vain. How were you taught to understand this?
Don't swear.
Don't swear. Yeah. Are you still there? Have you expanded your understanding of what this means, I wonder? I have. That's a leading question, but I wonder if anybody else has.
I have a Jewish friend that I lost several years ago, and he and I were having a discussion one time, and it has stuck with me ever since. And he said, and forgive me, I'm about to say something that would be considered taking the Lord's name in vain. He said, if I say God damn it, that's not taking the Lord's name in vain. If I say I killed because God told me to kill, I did something abusive to another person because God told me to do that. I was disrespectful to someone because God instructed me to do that. That is taking God's name in vain.
Yeah. I've kind of moved to a similar, I think there's much worse ways that we take God's name in vain than in cursing. And I think claiming to have God behind us and things that are obviously destructive to God's community and creation and care and people is much more of an offense to the name of God than a moment of frustration when you stub your toe and a word comes out of your mouth. You know what I mean? I kind of feel similarly. And I think, that we've kind of lost the plot there a little bit. And that we should be very discerning when we assume, that our actions are in the name of, we should take a lot of care and thought and real discernment in when we claim to be working for the name, in God's name on things like that. Yeah, for sure. Thank you, that was a perfect example, Okay, the fourth commandment, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, the one that so many of us kind of, me included, overlook. Me included, overlook.
Well, the classic example is the class teaches a lesson on that particular commandment, and then they all go out to the cafeteria and lunch, and which makes other people have to work for you.
Yeah. And this is observed in different ways in Judaism itself, much less in our own Christian understanding. And I think it's fact. But what I'm really struck by here, and I want to keep reading because I think it's telling. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son, or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns.
Ooh.
I know.
Who's doing the most work?
This idea that just like it's not just for you, and it's for all. And you are to make sure that any that are under your jurisdiction also get the benefit of the Sabbath day, whether or not they, are Jewish in themselves, but that this is for all of, the Sabbath day was meant for all, and for all of creation. And I think especially as they're getting ready to establish their own cultures and communities and kingdom, the idea that, hey, we need you to pay special attention to this. Here now in the year of our Lord 2026, it looks a little different. We're not, we live in a culture in which some observe this and some don't. And when I worked at the hospital, we often, in Houston, I did a residency as a chaplain there. There was an Orthodox Jewish community that would often need to come to use, obviously, the hospital. And the ways that, culture did not allow them, they had to ask for help to push the button on the elevator, other ways of observing this that I maybe myself don't find necessarily part of my calling in this, but the point still stood that they were, it was countercultural. Everything they were doing was countercultural, but it is for us too to observe this. My son has soccer game at 3 o'clock today because it rained so much earlier this month that it got rescheduled for a Sunday. We're constantly having to make choices and decisions about how we're going to observe
In
this.
some countries, in Germany, this is a while back.
Yeah.
The bells would ring. Very few people went to church.
Yeah.
But they had unions, and the union said, we do not work our retail. We're closed on Sunday, and they were closed on Sunday.
Yeah.
And even though they were not necessarily, it was leftover, but because people needed it.
Yeah.
Still do, but
That's right, but what doesn't,
we just go
yeah, it takes a lot of effort now.
24 hours a day.
Yeah, it's not thank you for, I didn't realize
It was-
that, that's fascinating.
I don't know whether it's changed, but
Yeah.
Well, you remember the blue laws?
it was a secular.
The blue laws, yeah.
Yeah, that was when they did away with the blue laws.
Mhm.
Debbie's got something.
Go ahead,
The
Debbie.
Sabbath doesn't necessarily mean on Sunday.
Thank goodness, because I work on Sundays.
So take your Sabbath.
That's exactly right. I think it's, what I think when I read this now in my day and age is like, okay, it's still countercultural, but like, how do we create space in this day and age? And for each of us, that might look different, to observe rest and to remember what that looks like. And we're having to be creative now in ways that, but I think creativity leads to really beautiful things. So I encourage us all to think about that and what that might look like. Okay, just a few more. So we did the Sabbath day, honor your father and mother. You shall not commit murder. I do want to talk about this one. Because in just a little bit, they will be entering into the promised land and a lot of murder is about to be committed. So, and so I think it's interesting, they believe that probably the way that this was better interpreted, let me quote them. It wasn't, you shall not, it used to be translated, you shall not kill. And now it's murder. Which, I don't know, I mean, killing is killing, but also murder tends to have a little bit more of an intent behind it, maybe.
Murder is a legal construct.
Yeah,
Whereas
yes.
killing is just
There we go.
binary.
Yeah, so there's this idea of murder, or this idea unintentional killing. The effect of the law is not to prevent all killing, but to regulate the taking of life and to make it subject to community control is kind of the idea of this one here. At the time, how it might have been interpreted. Just giving y'all some historical context there. You can interpret it exactly how you want to interpret it, but there we go. And then we have, you shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, which I always felt like was a really odd one to have in here. Like, what? Not that that's not, you know what I mean, but it just seems kind of in a different vibe of the rest of this. But it's there. And again, that this maybe had more to do with the laws that were going to be established in Numbers and Deuteronomy as they walked into the promised land in the new kingdom. They also think there are some that interpret, sorry, we'll back up one, you shall not steal to the kidnapping of persons, in some translations. So that steal might be better translated as kidnapping, which is interesting as well. So, it's all kind of confusing. And then finally, the 10th one, that you shall not covet. And then it goes into all the different examples. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or male or female slave, or ox or donkey, ass, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. This idea of there. And that, yeah, adultery was considered only, it was not considered only a property offense, but that it was also regarded as shameful and an offense against God. But there's no doubt that this also has to do with a lot of property. House, wife, slave, livestock. It tends to emphasize a lot of property there. But yeah, those are the 10 commandments.
Thank you.
And tomorrow, and next week we're going to talk about the Beatitudes.
No, isn't it fruit of the spirit?
For that's the one. Is it the same thing? Whatever one, I will figure it out before next week. There's an email coming to my inbox.
Yes.
They're all ready.
together, right?
It's all going to be. It's going to be good. It's going to be New Testament. It's going to be great.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you very much. Okay. Don't forget to take a picture of this for me since
Yes,
I'll
sir.
follow it on.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's go through our prayer list. Thank you, Katie.
Of course. Thank you guys.
We talked about Deborah earlier, so we'll pray for her. She's supposed to talk to the doctor tomorrow to find out if she needs surgery or not. They're gonna figure out how to proceed. And this is from Linda Belzer, praise. I was in a T-bone accident in Houston, May 11th. Tell us more.
It's a miracle. I don't even have a scratch. Yeah, my car is. Come on.
Did you see it coming?
No. I mean, it was like out of nowhere.
Good grief, I'm glad you're safe. That's amazing. That is a miracle. Okay, pray for Jessie Cohen. She's flying back home to Singapore tomorrow.
She's coming here, she's coming to Dallas from
Oh,
Singapore.
she'll be here tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, very good. And pray for Danny Cohen, brother-in-law in the hospital in Florida. For
Blood clot.
blood clots.
Sorry, I have bad writing.
No, this strap is over the, and then Dale and Randy Cohen for a safe trip, and they're going, where are they going? The trip to,
Sardinia Friday.
that's what I thought that said, Sardinia. Okay, that's
I've never
awesome.
been there, so we'll see.
That's awesome.
Let us know.
That's awesome.
Let us know.
That's incredible. Well, I hope you safe travels for that. Are there any other prayers to add to our prayer list? If not, let's pray. Katie, thanks again.
Of
And let's
course.
pray.
Love being with you.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for a time that we can study a lesson about things we thought we knew everything about. We learned a lot today. Thank you for the time and preparation from Katie and the lesson that she presented. Father, we pray for Deborah Alexander as she is recovering from a TIA, and help her as she navigates the medical process to find out what's going on with her blood vessels in her neck. Have a praise from Linda Gelser, who was in a T-bone accident and didn't have a scratch or a bruise. Thank you for protecting her. We have we'll pray for Jessie Cohen as she flies from Singapore tomorrow to Dallas. And we'll pray for Danny Cohen, brother-in-law in the hospital in Florida with blood clot. Pray for Dale and Randy as they have a trip to Sardinia on Friday. Father, we thank you for our church, for our pastor, for our staff. Help us to be your hands and feet in this part of the world. Amen.
So Katie, are you done now? No more work today?
Yes, because something got canceled. So yes.
What did you get?
Park tonight. We were supposed to have some conversations after church, but people got sick, so we're gonna reschedule. Yes, the hardest part of my day is over before 10:45.
Done preaching and teaching.
Preaching, I'm gonna go take a nap for that soccer
You got a
game.
soccer game? Good for you.
You too.
Yeah, I know.